The vase that we're now looking at is another one by the Kleophrades painter. It's known as the Vivenzio Hydria, and it shows scenes from the Trojan War. But it's got a very different feel from Kleophrades' other scene, the one of Dionysus and the Maenads that we've previously looked at together. So we're going to go through the images and I'm going to point out to you exactly what we are seeing. Then we'll talk about the overall feel of this particular vase, and then we'll think about the historical reasons, what's happening in Greece, to try and better understand why the Kleophrades painter would have shown war in this particular light. So what you're seeing in the top scene is a woman who is entirely bared. You can see her her body is on show. And this is Cassandra, the famous daughter of King Priam of Troy, who was, I suppose, afflicted with being able to see the future, but nobody would believe her. So she famously saw the downfall of Troy in advance. And that's the tragedy of her, that she could have warned them, but people don't believe her. Now, not only is it a horrendous act that Ajax, who is the man grabbing hold of her there, has bared her and is violating her, but she is holding on to a statue of Athene. And we've seen this before on the frieze of the Temple of Apollo at Bassae. That is you supplicating that goddess, asking for their protection. And he should know that. As a civilized Greek, he should know. So this is an act of hubris and brutality from Ajax, because he's taking no notice of her seeking protection there in that temple. And just to make the scene even more emotive, if you look behind the statue, we've got two women who are sat there with their head in their hands. And this is a very traditional grief pose in Greek art. If you see somebody with their hands raised to their head, or sometimes just their hand resting on their chin, they're in a moment of grief. And we get a real sense of desperation from these women. Not even the gods can save them from what is happening. If we then move to the image below, which actually just is a continuation of the scene at the top, we've just moved further round the vase to the right-hand side. We've got an even more difficult scene to look at. We've got King Priam, the elderly king of Troy. And, you can see he's elderly because if you look very closely at his head, his hair is thinning. And he is sat on the altar. And next to him, kind of striding forwards with one hand raised above his head, about to perform the killer blow, is Neoptolemus, the son of Achilles. And again, this is an act of hubris and great brutality. He is killing a man whilst he is sat on an altar. Again, something that should be a symbol of protection and therefore require you to show mercy. You'll notice as well that there are some red markings on King Priam. So we've got this way of showing blood on this particular vase. The red slip has been used to add that particular detail. Now, if you look on King Priam's knees, this is really difficult to kind of focus on, but we've got the grandson. We've got Astyanax, who is Hector's son and Andromache's son. And he was in the mythology thrown as a young boy from the walls of the city by the Greeks. And that is his lifeless body lying on his grandfather's knees. So this is just an incredibly difficult vase to look at. Wherever you focus, these dreadful moments that are occurring. Now, if we think about why are we seeing a scene where the Greeks are depicted in such a way? This is terrible behaviour on behalf of the Greeks. And it shows that war is a desperate situation. And we're seeing the impact on civilians here, young children and, the elderly as well. Well, to better understand this, we need to go to the date of the vase and have a look at what's going on in Greece at the time. Well, this vase is dated 490 to 480 BC. And anybody who knows their Greek history knows that these are the decades in which the Greeks are fighting the Persians. So what Kleophrades is doing here is putting forward his views on warfare, on the sadness, on the desperation, on the cost of life. And that is the reason for a move away from a more glorious interpretation of warfare in which the Greeks look superior and heroic, to one in which we're meant to think about it in an entirely different light. Finally, I just wanted to point out to you one other element of this vase before we finish. So I'm just going to scroll to the left of the Cassandra scene. And we've got the scene from Virgil's Aeneid, Book 2, where Aeneas carries his elderly father Anchises out of Troy, followed by his young son Ascanius. So Aeneas is the one in the helmet, wrapping his arms around Anchises, who we can tell is the older because of his thinning hair and the crutch behind his shoulders. And then shown in smaller size next to the shield of Aeneas is his son Ascanius. And in terms of the anatomy, just have a look at the way at which Aeneas's knees are buckling. We really get that idea that this is an immensely difficult task and is putting his body under stress. And finally, just let your eyes drop right down to the bottom of the vase there. Again, thinking about poses and anatomy, the head completely falling back there of that figure beneath the feet of Ajax. So an incredibly emotive, incredibly realistic vase.